Well, hello and welcome to episode number 434 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's pack show, Ryanair have a moan about delays, a Rogue Curtain delays a BA flight, and an Airbus A321 has fun with a tug. In the military news this week, Armando talks about the Warbird mid-air collision in Dallas this past week, and joining me this week, as always, across the fields in the glorious, sprawling Buckinghamshire countryside, and I hope it's not as wet as it has been here, it's Neville Bounds.
Yes, hello, I am back. Having had a week in the flat country that we call the Netherlands, and very nice it was too. Got a bit wet yesterday, mind you, walking from one of the universities back to the bus station. But no, a very hectic week, a bit of Schiphol Airport business, which was a bit challenging at times. I think a top tip from Masha, actually, is that I should be using Rotterdam Airport in future because it's smaller and things move a bit quicker, I think. I would say so. So I'm going to do that for my next visit. But no, all well, mate. Thank you very much.
Good. What was the equipment of choice for this week?
320 in both directions. Very full flight as well. And in fact, yesterday they were bumping some people off the flight because they'd oversold it. So they bumped, I think, 6 people off yesterday's return sector back to Heathrow, and 4 of them accepted it with good grace, and 2 didn't. I don't know what I mean.
Is this a similar thing to what we witnessed in Jersey, Nev?
Not quite. Slightly worse in some respects. But I mean, there was another flight 2 hours later. Now, I presume the airline can see if they've got connecting flights or whether they're just going straight back to London. But yeah, there was a bit of strop going on, which we don't like to see. No, that was all okay, but it took forever to board. I think it must have taken over an hour to board the aircraft, as if they hadn't done it before. So anyway.
Ouch.
But well, there you go.
But there you go.
The hazards of flying.
There we go. So Armando is not with us this week. Unfortunately, Armando couldn't make the show, but he has got a little bit of video that he sent in for us to play out in just a moment, plus military news, which he's also got for us this week as well. And Matt, as you can probably tell, as I'm here in the PTUK Master Suite studio, Matt is currently doing a live outside broadcast in our glorious town of Bungay here in Suffolk. So if you feel like asking your smart device or your smart speaker to say play Park Radio Dis, you'll be able to hear Matt broadcasting a bit in our town here this evening. I think they're having an 80s night, I think, in there. But we have got a super sub. He's joining us back again. He's not been on the show for quite a while, but we managed to drag him away from all his family of A320s, which he flies very regularly indeed. So welcome back onto the show. It's from the A320 podcast. It's Matt. Welcome back, Matt.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Nev. Hi, Carlos. Thanks for having us back on. Yeah, it's been too long, hasn't it? I've been listening out, but missing you all. So here I am.
So I'm guessing, obviously, Nev just said there, Matt, that things are racking up, I should say, or racking up with passengers getting back on board BA flights. I'm guessing with the airline that you work for, are you seeing packed seats again?
Yeah, definitely. Pretty much all summer, actually. I think every flight I've done has pretty much been full, yeah, or oversold. So it's been busy, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Any nice destinations lately? Have you been to the best island in Europe? Obviously, Malta.
No, I haven't. The base where I'm based, we don't do Malta, unfortunately, but I have been there in the past. What did I do last? I went to the Canary Islands. I went to Gran Canaria last week. And similarly to Nev, I've been travelling around a bit myself in my spare time. Did a couple of nights in Berlin last week, and very similar story to Nev, headed out on an A320 from Heathrow. So yeah, very interesting. First time I've been through the new Berlin airport and their new terminal.
Oh,
yes, finally it's open, isn't it? Yeah. Gosh,
yeah.
Took them a while, didn't it?
Yeah, and I got to sit at the front. I was in row 3, I think. I got a
Very good.
very kind upgrade. So there was the best business class flights, aren't they? The ones that cost the same as economy.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, but they're all few and far between, unfortunately.
Yes.
But no, if you've got someone in the right place that can help you, definitely a good
Yeah.
flight.
Always good, always handy. So we've got a piece of video to play, haven't we, Nev? If you want to do the introductions, I shall get this ready.
Yes, we're going to. Is Armando going to speak to us next?
He is, yeah.
Good, excellent. Well, let's see what he's got to say for himself this week.
Hey everybody, greetings from the flight levels. Contractually, Nev is on the show today, so I cannot be on the show. No, I'm just kidding about that. You guys do know we're always kidding about that. Anyways, sorry I actually can't be on the show. This is what I'll be doing all weekend long. Today I'm in the Pilatus, flying from Charlotte up to New York, and then back. Single pilot, empty airplane. It's pretty nice to just get an airplane to yourself. Tomorrow I'll be back in the jet, in the Hawker. I'll be flying that all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 4 days in a row is pretty much about as much as I work. But unfortunately, you know, as much as I ask for Fridays off, they just don't give them to me. But either ways, it's good to see everybody. We got some great stories. I looked at the show notes. We got some great videos to play out today. The guys take great care of you. And I wish I had internet, but I don't, so I could listen to the show. But anyway, everybody have a great week, and we will hopefully catch you next week. Take care.
Honestly.
Look at him with his jacket and his aviator sunglasses. God dear.
The guy honestly doesn't slum it, does he? He does not slum it at all.
Amazing what you can do when you sit.
Armando's green screens are so realistic. Yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's amazing what you can do sitting sideways against a green screen.
Oh my word! Richard Adams is saying in the chat room to think most people don't even get to fly different desks, let alone aircraft. Very true, Richard, very true. And talking about the chat room, let's have a look at see who's in the chat room this week joining us for the show. We've got Richard Adams, who was in there nice and early this week, as always. Good to see you. Mazouz, hello to you, Mazouz Karim. Good to see you in there as well. Dirk S, good evening, folks, he says. Hello to you, Dirk. Bill is in there as well. He's joining us, Nev, from snowy Ottawa.
Oh yes, the nice. Snow has arrived in Canada, isn't it? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so hello to you. Hobby Time, hello to you as well. Matt C, I don't know who that guy is.
No.
Funny guy is Matt C. Tony S, hello to you. Lovely Masha as well. Hello, Masha. Hope you haven't had all the rain that we have, Masha, because it's been blooming wet here. Falk Peelman movie?
Yes, now that's John
who is that?
Falk. Now, you know John, don't you, Carlos? Because we met him on the plane when we were going to the Jersey Air Show. We're going to have a little segment featuring some stuff that John sent me during the week this week. We're going to split it into 2 parts, actually. We're going to play the second part next week, but we're going to have a quick view of some of the stuff that John sent us this week. So I'm really looking forward to that, actually.
Yes, so good evening to you, John. Thanks for tuning in this week. We've got Armando. Armando has joined us in the chat room. He must have got Wi-Fi up there with the PC12. Tony S, if I don't miss anyone out. Don't forget, if you are listening to our glorious voices via your podcast download platform, don't forget to check us out on YouTube with the video podcast every Friday at 7 o'clock live. Don't forget, check us out, Plain Talking UK on YouTube. Don't forget, click that subscribe and click that bell icon as well to be notified when either me or Matt is hitting the go live button, which was me this week. It's quite nice pressing the go live button actually for a change. It's quite exciting there, pushing that button just for a change. And yes, and join us in the YouTube chat room with all the YouTube family, because it is what makes the show is our YouTube chat room every week. So I'll tell you what, Nev, I'm going to get the stuff ready and I'll leave the intro for you to do.
Yes, so we always start off the show with the commercial military segment. So let's go.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. flight. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
So this first story for this week comes to us from the standard.co.uk and ft.com, and it's kind of the news I think that a lot of people have been waiting to hear for quite some time. And according to reports, 2 Russians and 1 Ukrainian convicted of shooting down the Malaysian Airlines MH17. A court in the Netherlands has found 3 men with links to the Russian military guilty of murder for their roles in the downing of the Malaysia Airlines MH17 over eastern Ukraine back in 2014, sentencing them to all life imprisonment for all of them, and 1 man was acquitted because of a lack of evidence. The 777 jet was heading from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur on July the 17th, 2014, when a Russian Buk surface-to-air missile exploded just off the cockpit. The blast caused the aircraft to crash in eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 passengers and crew on board, including 80 children and 193 Dutch citizens. At the conclusion of the 2.5-year trial on Thursday this week, a panel of Dutch judges in The Hague found the 3 men guilty of murder. The court ordered the guilty parties to pay 16 million euros in damages to the victims of the next of kin, and one of the men was represented in court by the lawyer, while the other 3 were tried in absentia. All remain free, raising doubts over whether the trio will serve their sentences in prison. The men are believed to be either in Russia or Ukrainian territories under Moscow's control. And the Financial Times article in the show notes will have plenty more information, which we'll put in with the show notes like we do every week on the show. So honestly, guys, it doesn't seem that long ago. I mean, it's just back in 2014 when this happened. And I can still remember seeing those pictures, that reconstruction. If you remember, they'd done a huge reconstruction over a framework of the fuselage of the aircraft, which they recovered. But having watched the air crash investigation episode on this only a few weeks ago, the investigation was quite a task. So I heard, Nev.
Yes, I mean, you can't even, I mean, a normal accident investigation under normal, sort of commercial circumstances is one thing, but when you've got, potential conflict from a military situation going on as well, which is clearly what has happened here, that's just a whole different, takes it to a whole different level, isn't it? And this was 2014. This is a long time ago now. Terribly sad for all of the victims and their families and friends. But I haven't got anything constructive to say about this, actually, because unfortunately, because they were tried in absentia, they all currently remain free. And whether they will actually serve their sentences in prison is open to question, I would imagine, as it says in the article. So, the thing is that whatever justice is served by the court in The Hague, it will never be enough for what has happened for the victims and their families and friends, obviously.
How do you feel about this, Matt? Obviously, you're flying around Europe quite a lot. I'm guessing, obviously, the airspace above, obviously, the Ukraine is closed to traffic, such as yourselves. But I guess this is still kind of something that's in the back of your mind as a pilot, a commercial airline pilot.
Yeah, certainly. I remember when it actually happened, thinking, that could have been any airliner and how vulnerable we are in that situation. We don't have any protection against anything like that. And, it's just horrible for all the families involved. One of my friends, his partner's Dutch, and her brother and sister-in-law and niece were on that flight flying from Amsterdam. It's just awful. And as Nev said, it doesn't really matter what happens in court because nothing's going to bring all those families back. So, it's just an awful story.
So moving on, to the next story. Matt, you've got this one, and obviously it's a story number 2, so it would normally be Matt reading a Ryanair story, but it is a Ryanair story this week, so over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Ryanair may prolong the 737NG service due to MAX delays. So Ryanair Holdings, so if you don't know who Ryanair Holdings are, they're sort of the holding company that own Ryanair, Ryanair UK, Buzz, which is their Polish part, and Malta Air. So the Ryanair Holdings as a group is considering prolonging its use of the 737-800 workhorse due to delayed 737-8200 deliveries, which is what Ryanair call the MAX. Chief Executive Michael O'Leary gave this information during the group's half-yearly earnings call. I won't do the accent. We're growing faster than we originally thought we would at this time because we're not retiring older aircraft. In fact, one of the aircraft we returned off an operating lease 2 years ago has now been offered back to us at a very significant discount. And we will opportunistically add Boeing 737NGs in 1s and 2s where there's a financial incentive to do so. The CH Aviation Fleet's advanced module shows that the LCC owns the entire fleet of 1 737-700, 409 737-800s, and 78 737-800s. Operated across its 4 AOCs, the one that I mentioned. However, the 29 A320s operated by Lauda Europe are all leased. O'Leary stressed that the MAX 200 delivery delays were hampering the LCC's ambitious post-COVID growth plans. The group was due to take a further 21 of the type by the end of 2022, but currently expects only 10 to 12. Ryanair Holdings hopes to receive 46 by the summer 2024 peak and has been assured by Boeing that this schedule will be met, although O'Leary conceded that some of the aircraft could slip to a later date. He emphasised that despite the delays, the airline was not looking to a second-hand market to add more 737s. There isn't much of a second-hand market out there at the moment on 737NGs. A lot of those aircraft have gone back into cargo conversion programs, etc., O'Leary pointed out. The group currently has 132 MAXs on order. O'Leary said the current backlog was sufficient to fuel the airline's growth for the next 3 years, although it already foresees a need for a new commitment. So more woes for Boeing, unfortunately, in this case. And you see it across a lot of airlines, actually. The airline I work for has actually pulled some aircraft back after giving them back to the leases. So they're all sprayed back into white and gone to the leases, and then realised that we didn't have enough aircraft, so brought them back again and sprayed them up again. So there's a lot of this going on in the industry, mainly due to the shortages of aircraft. Everyone's trying to buy them. And yeah, I've heard from a few people that the second-hand market in airliners, which you don't really think about, do you? But actually there's a huge market out there. And, you know, the Far East and particularly China are growing pretty quickly over the last few years, which has absorbed a lot of the second-hand market. So yeah, there's just not many out there. Very similar to the second-hand car market in Europe, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, and I'd forgotten, of course, that the Lauda Europe are operating an all Airbus fleet as well. They've got 29 A320-200s. So yeah, I just wonder. I mean, this sort of slippage of manufacturing, especially coming out of Boeing, has been going on for a long time now, and it must be very difficult for the airlines to try and schedule flights and come up with timetables that are sensible based on deliveries that they don't really know when they're going to get some of this stuff.
Also, as well, I suppose, especially with Ryanair, their aircraft, those NG, those 737-800s, they're not just doing one flight a day. Some of these are 4 or 5 rotations a day of these aircraft. They are heavily used aircraft.
The aircraft will be doing between 6 and 8 flights a day minimum.
Yeah, high mileage. I won't be buying those on Auto Trader. Anyway, Nev, you've got the next story, and
when I saw this story, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, I'd be interested in the chat room's opinion about this, but here we go. It's on the standard.co.uk. British Airways passengers vent anger as faulty curtain grounds flight from Seville to Gatwick. Well, the BA flight from Seville to London was delayed by about an hour and a half due to a fault with the curtain separating business class and economy travellers. Passengers on the flight from Seville to London Gatwick told The Standard on Monday afternoon they had never heard anything so ridiculous before they eventually took off just over 3 hours late. The flight was due to leave Seville at 11:30 local time AM, but didn't actually take off until 2:45 PM. BA stressed that the majority of the delay was due to foggy conditions, which meant the plane could not land in Seville until around 12:30 local time, more than an hour after it was due to leave. While the issue with the curtain was safety related, passengers were very angry and suggested cutting off the curtain. One passenger told The Standard from on board the grounded plane. Travellers were told by staff at the boarding gate and later by the crew on board that the plane had a faulty curtain, which was causing the delay. It's understood that the fault with the curtain left part of the rail structure loose and could have posed a hazard had the plane taken off before it was secured. Right. Well, I've got a lot of questions here. Now, that last paragraph, by the way, I suppose had there been a rejected takeoff or something like that, then you don't want stuff loose in the cabin. I get all that completely. And there was a lot of foggy weather around at the start of the week. And that was causing a lot of delays within Europe, certainly within Belgium and Netherlands and other parts of Europe as well. But Matt, what do you think? If in your operation, if you had a curtain that was faulty, would you just not depart? Is that one of those things where the cabin is not secure?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things going on here. I would imagine it's not going to be a 3.5 hour delay caused by this. They've said that it was actually delayed by foggy conditions. So what I reckon is that the aircraft's come in delayed and there was some extra delay due to the curtain, reading between the lines there. It's probably out of the crew's hands. I mean, if you've got a piece of metal hanging from the top of the cabin, you can't depart. I mean, they're moaning about running late. Imagine how much they'd be moaning if in the flight it fell off and hit them on the head. Yeah. So it'd have been out of the crew's hands, if that part is loose. We have what's called an MEL, which is a minimum equipment list, and we go into it. So if there's something missing, you can go in there and see if it's something you can go without, and that every item will be on there. So,
the MEL is a very much a binary list, isn't it? It's a pass-fail scenario. There's no negotiation about it.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't override it. It's set in stone. So you have to go into this manual, and it might say, there's 3 fitted, 2 required on some things, or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you covered it last week. You had the Jet 2 that landed with, because it had no toilets on board. Did you read about that one?
Yes.
So that if you go into the MEL, that says you can go with no toilets. Whether you go with no toilets is a different story.
You're actually allowed to fly if the toilets aren't functioning on your aircraft.
Well, it doesn't affect the operation of the airplane. It's not a safety issue. It's a human welfare issue, isn't it? So Airbus only decides what's safe. It doesn't decide what's practical. So that is the captain's responsibility to decide whether it's safe to operate with no toilets.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to see a 3-hour flight go with no toilets on board.
Has this ever happened to you, Matt, by any chance?
Well, funny you should say that, because on my flight last week to Berlin, the curtain between business class and economy was stuck. And the first officer had to come out and fix it. Yeah. Although it wasn't broken, it was just in the wrong place. And the cabin crew weren't allowed to move it or something. For some reason, the divider was 3 rows into economy or something. So they had a little conflab going on and chaos seemed to be ensuing. And then the first officer came, unreleased 2 clips, slid it along 3 rows and then went back in the flight deck. So
have you noticed on the, I don't know if it's just on the Airbus aircraft, but I only ever tend to fly on Airbus aircraft these days because I'm on BA the whole time. But those curtains, they can be really difficult to manoeuvre sometimes. And just when you do see the crew manoeuvring the toy if they're not in the right place, the sounds that these things make, that it's not nice, is it? And it's sort of metal against metal all the time. It just feels as though it's a bit mechanically challenged, shall we say?
I wouldn't know, Nev, unfortunately, on a single class cabin.
Of course not.
Poor Matt, honestly. Actually, Falk is saying in the chat room, actually, duct tape in the cruise packs if the support is loose. I mean, duct tape is a good thing to fix fix anything, really.
Well, I don't go anywhere without my gaffer tape. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Business. Richard Adams saying businesses being viewed by the peasants in economy disgraceful.
It's an argument, certainly. Yeah.
Oh my word! Honestly, you guys and girls in the chat room, what are you like? Next story. Moving on. Is coming to us from Reuters.com, and do you know, when I read this, Nev, Matt, I thought Airbus were the only company that had issues with this, but obviously not. This is all about Boeing wants the US FAA to approve a paint fix for the 787 wing peeling. So not only Airbus have got problems with paint peeling. So Boeing said on Monday this week that operators of its 787 Dreamliner jets have experienced paint peeling issues on wing and horizontal stabilizer surfaces due to ultraviolet radiation exposure, and asked US regulators to approve its plan to address the issue. The announcement is the most recent evidence of an exterior problems on the latest carbon composite jets, as Europe's Airbus faces a $2 billion London court battle with Qatar Airways over the deteriorating surface of its competing A350s. Airbus argues it's generic but harmless problem stemming from the way the paint and carbon interact, while Qatar Airways, which operates both competing types, blames a deeper A350 defect, potentially weakening lightning protection on those jets alone, and both manufacturers insist the lightweight models are safe. Until now, Boeing's interim fix has involved repeat use of speed tape over affected areas that led to some passengers posting photos online of 787 wings with tape and raised concerns. Now Boeing wants the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, to approve its plan to incorporate a layer of ultraviolet blocking black top coat between the primer and the white top coat. Christ, these aircraft are going to weigh about 3 tons more after all this. Even though the use of speed tape has no effect on the safety of the aircraft, the public could perceive an unsafe condition when seeing tape on the wing surfaces, told the FAA. Boeing said in its filing that the petition will address a fleet significant maintenance issue that is creating a public perception of an unsafe condition, as well as creating the potential for significant airplane downtime. Boeing said in its filing the fix was needed in part because the paint peeling issue requires the operators to repaint the wing and horizontal stabilizers at a much higher frequency. And plus it looks a bit naff as well if the paint's peeling off, let's be honest. The company said in the statement to Reuters it had asked the FAA to approve the proposed change to eliminate paint adhesion issues with some of the 787s. They understood the importance of a pristine appearance to the products, to both our customers and the flying product. Boeing has also asked the FAA for approval of other design changes, including adding cap seals over the nuts of certain 787 wing fasteners, because certain combinations could lead to ignition sources in the fuel tank. Not a problem there then. The FAA, which said on Monday this week it would carefully review Boeing's petition in August, approved the first 787 for delivery since 2021. Boeing halted deliveries back in May 2021 after the FAA raised concerns about proposed inspection methods. And while Boeing says its problems come from UV light, the Airbus Qatar court case focuses on conditions within the multi-layer exterior. Through both sides have seen very different interpretations. So it's not just Airbus then, guys, who have got the issue. Boeing have got the issue as well, and Nev's got his duct tape out.
Bring off a foot or so there.
I'll tell you what, don't put that on the aircraft, Nev. You'll pull the paint off.
It's true, and it's the wrong colour as well.
It's the wrong colour as well.
Good point.
Now, Matt, obviously the aircraft, all the aircraft you fly are all pristine, so I didn't expect you have the issue with the paint peeling.
No, I've not. Well, actually, that's not true. I think some of the older ones you do sometimes get a little bit peeling off, but I think it's important to say this because I see this a lot in newspapers and on online articles of what speed tape is for. So speed tape is not structural. It doesn't hold anything together. What speed tape is for is to smooth airflow over something. So if you was to have a crack or something in just a piece, or say like the paint, the speed tape is not there to hold anything on. The speed tape is to smooth the airflow over where the paint has peeled off, because that would create drag and disturbed airflow. So just to clear that up, that it doesn't act like you would use, it's not used like you would use duct tape. First thing. And yeah, I've heard of this actually. I thought it was just on the 350. I assume they had a fix for it, because I've not really heard any other airlines other than Qatar complaining about the 350, and obviously there's a lot of 350 operators out there. So yeah, not exactly sure what's causing it.
I remember reading in a previous article some time ago, obviously because Qatar, based where they are, they've got very high skin temperatures, I would imagine, when the aircraft are parked on the gate. And this might be a contributory factor to it, perhaps.
There's a lot of comments in the chat room, actually. I'm just reading through about a lot of impressive comments about the speed tape. John Jester is in the chat as well.
Sorry to interrupt you. With Matt saying what he's just said, that's just spoilt my entire illusion, because I've been believing everything that's been in the press regarding speed tape. So.
That you can build an airline out of speed tape.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, speed tape is sticky. You can fix stuff with it, but when it's on the exterior of the aircraft, it's for airflow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, totally. Matt. Admit it to everyone now. You've got a couple of rolls at home you use to sort of, put the kids' photos on the fridge.
Yeah, exactly. Always. Everyone has some. It comes when you get a house, doesn't it? It comes with it.
Speed tape. Yeah, fix most things. Like you said, that's like duct tape, though, Nev. Fix most things. Plug a hole.
All you need,
anything.
Any toolbox. All you need, duct tape and a hammer. What? That's it. Fix anything.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, moving on before we get a contract with speed tape suppliers. Matt, you've got the next story, and it's all about a couple of aircraft that I think we saw these, didn't we, Nev, back in Farnborough a few years back?
We did, yes.
Yeah, a bit of nostalgia here. So 2 oil-busting Boeing 727s find a new home at Teesside International Airport. 2 oil-busting jets are to be based at Teesside International Airport. The Boeing 727 aircraft will land in their new home, where they will be based following the closure of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. The first of the 2 planes arrived at the airport on Wednesday, November the 16th, and will operate on behalf of Oil Spill Response Limited, OSRL. The jets could be deployed anywhere in the world in the event of a major oil spill. They work by spraying dispersant material, with each one able to hold almost 4,000 gallons. This will be a new home for the 2 aircraft, following the closure of the Doncaster Sheffield Airport, which serves as the programme's operational base for more than 10 years. The teams train regularly to prepare for any possible emergencies and fly on average around 6 times a month. Practice drills can see the planes fly as low as 150 feet at speeds of around 150 knots, which is much slower than standard commercial services that fly at around 500 knots. The operation is sponsored by the oil industry and closely monitored by the UK Civil Aviation Authority, the Marine Management Organisation, and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency.
I don't know any aircraft that flies at 500 knots at 150 feet.
I was just going to say, do you see my eyebrows rise as I read that bit out? 150 knots, 500 knots, 150 feet. That's going to be a pretty long landing, I think.
Yes.
I still remember these, Nev, when we were up on the media centre up at Farnborough, and they'd done that display. I think it's when we had all the guys from APG over as well, and they'd done that display where they flew over, and they released water from the spray booms along the aircraft, didn't they? If you remember that.
Yeah.
That was a very nice. It's so good to see the 7.2 because it was such a popular and very, very well utilised aircraft back in the sort of 70s, 80s, and right through till now. I think, isn't there still... I can't remember whether the cargo carriers have still got these in use. I'm sure the chat room will...
I think they've just got rid of them, but Volatea, is it? They were operating them till pretty recently, I think. They used to have a simulator down in Burgess Hill in the south of the UK. They had one in there that was pretty much only used by them. Yeah.
Gosh. And this is another consequence, of course, of closing Doncaster Sheffield Airport, former RAF Finningley. That's just unbelievable, isn't it? That they couldn't keep that going. One of the longest runways in the country as well. So I don't know whether it will ever come back, but yeah, I still find that very shocking in its own right, I've got to say.
That's okay, Nev. I'm sure it'll be fine. There'll be some, housing estate built on there soon.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
We need them to build an air park on there.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Nev, you have got you've got the next story, and it's coming to us from somewhere where they obviously have issues with tugs.
Yes, I don't know if you've got any pictures for this one, Carlos, but it's on simpleflying.com and aviation24.be. Aircraft tug gets stuck under Air Transat Airbus A321neo. Well, the incident first started when Charlie Golf Oscar India Romeo was being pushed back, and everything went along relatively smoothly until the tow bar allegedly failed by braking, according to Air Transat, the airline commented. On Wednesday, November the 2nd, a technical incident involving an Air Transat aircraft occurred at Vancouver International Airport, where a tow bar broke as the aircraft was being pushed back from the gate. Passengers were disembarked and booked on another flight. Whilst it was fortunate that Charlie Golf Oscar India Romeo was not damaged during the initial incident, the aircraft's fate was subsequently changed when the second incident happened just hours later when it was being towed. Air Transat confirmed the occurrence of a second episode by saying, following the required inspection from the first incident, the aircraft was towed to an overnight parking bay, and a second incident occurred where the aircraft collided with the tug. Damages were caused to the aircraft, but no passengers were on board at that point. Both incidents are under investigation. Well, due to the snapped tow bar, the tow tug leapt underneath the aircraft fuselage and caused significant damage. Fortunately, there were no reports of personnel injuries resulting from both incidents. But pictures circling on social media show the aircraft bearing a gaping tear near its nose section, and it was not the prettiest of sights for such a young aircraft. Well, whatever the cause of the ground equipment failure, or if it's anyone's fault, the aircraft remains quite damaged and has since been grounded at Vancouver International Airport, where it awaits a lengthy repair process. I remember being a passenger on an A319, I think it was, coming out of Heathrow one day, just as we pushed back. This is before they started using the little motorised moto toks that Carlos and I have did an interview about years ago. And when one of those tow bars breaks, it doesn't half make a big sound. And if you're in the cockpit, it must be even louder, I would imagine. So, Matt, have you ever had a tow bar break on you?
I'm trying to think. No, I've not had one break. I've spoken to quite a few people that have, though. It's probably more common than you'd imagine, but often on the headset, they'll just ask us to apply the brakes. Sometimes there's a miscommunication, something like this happens. But actually, the nose wheel is quite far back. People don't realise when we're trying to steer on the taxiway, the nose, we have to sort of allow for where the nose wheel is. It's pretty much actually where the galley is. So where they're standing right at the front is where the nose wheel is. So yeah, you probably hear it more on row one where you always are, Nev.
Yes, I did.
So you're closer to the nose wheel than we are.
Yeah, but And yes, I think this was a couple of years ago now, but I mean, it didn't take too long, and luckily there was no damage to the aircraft either. But yeah, they just got
No, they have a safety mechanism inside, so the tow bar will break. It's a bit like one of those wrenches where you can set the torque on them. It's a similar that it will break before it damages the nose wheel mechanism. So generally, you just replace the tow bar and the nose wheel's fine.
Gosh.
Actually, I've just got if I grab this here, I'll put that on the screen. There we go. As well, of the tug wedged
Ouch.
fairly well underneath there.
I can feel the reams of paperwork being collated and gathered together as we look at that picture.
Imagine spending 120 million on a A320 Neo and then someone whacks the tug into it.
God, dear. Horrific. Absolutely horrific. But yeah.
Someone put in the group, speed tape fix?
Yes.
I think even that might be a little bit much for speed tape. That would be some poly filler. I think would be a good one. So Matt, you've got the next story, and this one is it's all about miles, which Nev would know all too much about.
Yeah. So Nev gets the A321 story. I get the air miles one. Flying Blue to add 3 stopovers, exactly. Here's why this could make your miles a lot more valuable. There's big news from Flying Blue, the loyalty program for Air France and KLM. Flying Blue will be adding 3 stopovers to award tickets on Air France and KLM metal in the coming days, as first reported by 1 mile at a time. The news was announced Monday in a webinar by Flying Blue's Ben Lipsey, Senior Vice President of Customer Loyalty. Now you're able to stop over for no additional charge for up to a year. Presently, suppose you are booking an itinerary from Los Angeles International Airport to Rome Fiumicino via Amsterdam Schiphol. In that case, Flying Blue's layover rules allow you to stay for a maximum of 23 hours and 59 minutes in Amsterdam. If you want to stay in Amsterdam for longer, you have to book 2 one-way tickets, so LAX to Amsterdam and then Amsterdam to Fiumicino. The free stopover will allow you to stay in Amsterdam for up to 12 months at no additional cost. Per the webinar, Flying Blue's free stopover will be valid on flights connecting Air France to Air France, KLM to KLM, Air France to KLM, and KLM to Air France. So, all permutations. For example, if you're traveling from Charles de Gaulle to Singapore, on Air France, passengers were able to stop for up to 12 months in Singapore before continuing on KLM's 5th Freedom flight from Singapore to Bali's airport. In theory, this itinerary would cost the same number of miles as traveling directly from Paris to Bali. Likewise, you could fly from JFK to Amsterdam on KLM, stay for a few days, and then continue to Prague for the same price as a ticket from New York to Prague. Lipsey also said that, as of now, the free stopover offer will only apply to flights on Air France and KLM metal, so customers who are connecting from Delta to KLM, for instance, will not be able to take advantage of the free stopover. Paris and Amsterdam are likely the 2 cities that will see the most stopovers, as almost all of Air France's and KLM's flights originate or terminate in these hubs. With up to 12 months to break up layovers, travellers can be strategic about how they want to book their connecting flights. Another example, students studying abroad in Europe can book Amsterdam or Paris as a stopover city and another European city as a final destination for a couple of weeks down the road. That's the perfect case for a weekend trip. Just to be clear, this is for award tickets only. So, yeah.
I'd love to know who offers the best rewards program. As a global thing, which airline offers the best for the customer reward program?
Don't know. I mean, they obviously themselves don't think it's a very simple thing because they had to give like 4 different examples in their press release.
Yes. And of course, they're always changing it as well, aren't they? That's the other thing. When I used to fly a lot with SAS, when I was doing a lot of backwards and forwards to Sweden, I got sort of a gold status there fairly quickly because they were very generous with it. But what I didn't fully appreciate is that the Swedish government were considering taxing people. If you're a Swedish citizen or a citizen of Norway or Denmark as well, if you used those points for private travel, I think that would be a step too far. But they did. I think they nearly went ahead with it at one point. But of course, these programs vary in generosity, according to perhaps how well the airline's doing or what the market situation is, perhaps.
Do you have a Flying Blue reward card now?
I do. I do have a card. Yes, it is not a blue one though. But I have.
Nev's is platinum.
No, but I do have an SAS card still, which has gone down to blue because I've only flown them twice in about a year. So, it's all changed now.
So, moving on to the next part of the show, that brings the commercial news to a close. So, Nev,
on that note, actually, Neil said in the chat, "Where's our PT UK miles program? We watch all these shows and suffer all that military."
That's a good
question, actually. Yeah, we should offer a PTUK miles plus Seat 1A reward program. What do you think?
Like it. Yeah. I think when we have our production meeting at the start of January, that's going to be agenda item number 1, won't it?
Oh, my word. We're going to sit here and figure this out now. Right, we need to get that in the books anyway.
Yep.
So, Nev, what's coming up next on the show?
Well, this is a bit of a treat. We often get sent books by Grub Street Publishing, and we were sent another one called Nat Boys by Rick Peacock-Edwards and Tom Eales, all about the fallen Nat. And this aircraft, of course, was used in the RAF mainly in the advanced training role in the 1960s and 70s, where it proved to be an ideal lead-in trainer for high-performance aircraft such as the iconic Lightning, the first RAF supersonic fighter. It was also the aircraft used by the famous Yellowjacks formation aerobatic team formed in 1964, the forerunner of the world-famous Red Arrows team, which was equipped with the Nat for over a decade before being replaced by the Hawk in 1980. Lesser known, the Nat was also used as a lightweight fighter by both the Indian and Finnish air forces. And in the case of India, the Nat, later called the Ajit, saw combat experience in the Indo-Pakistani wars, most notably in the Battle of Boira. Today, over 60 years since the aircraft first flew, several Nats continue to be operated from North Weald Airfield in Essex by the Heritage Aircraft Trust under the brand the Nat Display Team. Well, this book, Nat Boys, was written by Rick Peacock-Edwards and Tom Eales. It relates the history of the aircraft and includes many fascinating and untold stories by those who flew the aircraft, many of them well-known and distinguished aviators, including those from the Indian and Finnish air forces. There's also a focus on the civilian life of the Nat in the 21st century, with accounts from those who continue to fly the aircraft with the Heritage Aviation Trust. Well, we have done a 3-part series of an interview with Rick, and in fact, Captain Nick Anderson was stationed with Rick on a number of occasions. So here's part 1 of his fascinating chat with him, which was filmed at White Waltham Aerodrome in Berkshire a few weeks ago.
I'm here today with Rick Peacock-Edwards, who's written a book all about the Nat, the fallen Nat as flown by the Royal Air Force and other air forces, called the Nat Boys. And we're going to talk to him about that and other subjects. But Rick, I'm dying to mention to everyone that you saved my flying career. But for our listeners, I wonder if you could give us a potted history, perhaps, of your time in the Air Force.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I'm the son of a Battle of Britain pilot, so flying was in the blood. But I grew up in South Africa and actually joined the RAF from South Africa. They shipped me across, and I was too old to go to Cranwell at the time, so I went the other route, straight into flying training basically, on the Jet Provost, and then advanced flying training on the Nat, and then did my sort of tactical weapon training on the Hunter, and then onto the Lightning, which was my dream aircraft.
Wow.
And I had 2 tours on the Lightning, one in Germany on 92 Squadron, and then one back at Coldershall, training those going to Germany basically on 65 Squadron. And then I went kicking and screaming into the training world went to Little Rissington and Kemble to become a qualified flying instructor on the Nat. And then I went back to Valley, this time as an instructor, where I had a really thoroughly enjoyable time. Got over 1,000 hours on that. In fact, I've got over 1,000 hours on quite a few aircraft. And then after that, I went to the Phantom, where we met at Lucas. Well, we met before that, but saw each other again at Lucas on different squadrons. I know which was the best one, so do you, but there we are. Then the rest of my flying career sort of partly oscillated around short ground tours, mainly in London and one in Washington. But I moved on to the Tornado, and I was the very first RAF pilot to fly the fighter version of the Tornado, and I had the job of forming the first squadron and introducing the aircraft into RAF service. And then that was a long association with the Tornado, both as commander of 65 Squadron, which was also the operational conversion unit at Coningsby. And then a little while later, I commanded the Tornado base at Leeming with 3 squadrons, from where I was the first commander actually in the build-up to the Gulf War out in Saudi Arabia. And then at the end of that tour, I thought, well, my flying days are over, and I went off to Washington into the British Embassy as an air attaché. But then I got promoted and came back as the RAF's Inspector of Flight Safety, where I flew absolutely everything. Had to stay current on quite a few types. At least one was operational, so I went back to the Tornado again. So I had a great tour there, basically sort of floating around the Air Force. I had responsibility for the whole Air Force, flew everything and met everyone, and it was a great experience. Then my final job in the Air Force was Director of Eurofighter Typhoon, so I was a fighter boy really from start to finish. And I retired from the Air Force with over 7,000 flying hours, 1,500 hours on the Lightning, 1,000 on the Nat, 1,000 on the Phantom, and over 1,000 on the Tornado, and a lot of other things too. And then, so that was my Air Force career, and in a nutshell, outside that, I've had also quite an exciting and interesting career in the outside world as well. But I think it's the flying career in the Air Force that you're more interested in.
Well, we are very interested in that, and that is a remarkable amount of flying and a fantastic time in the Air Force, so congratulations. I found the book, Nat Boys, which you wrote along with Tom Eales, a delightful read, both as a historic record of a remarkable little jet and as a wonderful collection of anecdotes. Who do you imagine will be your target audience for the book?
Well, the target audience, as far as I'm concerned, we're concerned, is any aviation enthusiast. But obviously the target audience that we've got from the start are all those who were involved with the Nat, who flew it, whether it was in the UK at Valley instructing, or with the Red Arrows, or overseas in India or Finland, and then of course the Nats are still flying today. So in the book, as you've seen, we come right up to date. We go from the start to where we are now, and it really was, well, it was a very satisfying piece of work that we did there, and I can explain more about how that happened.
Absolutely, we'd love to hear that. Yeah, I'm in touch with a group of guys in New Zealand who are trying to bring a Nat back into flying condition out there, which is fantastic. Interestingly, the Nat only stayed in service with the RAF for 16 years, which is quite a short time, say, compared with the Hawker Hunter, which flew in the same year but carried on with the Air Force for nearly 40 years, and in other countries for 60 years. Indeed, the Nat's replacement, the BAE Hawk, still going strong 48 years later. Why was the Nat's life so short?
In my view, it was because the Nat was just a beautiful aircraft to fly, in my view. It's a perfect lead-in trainer for aircraft like the Lightning. it, as you would have seen from the book, all those who contributed, one of the things that comes out to me is that everybody who flew the Nat loved flying it. It's a little pocket rocket. It's a sports car of the skies, basically. And I certainly loved flying it. But there were things in the Nat. If you didn't know what you were doing with the aircraft, it could kill you very quickly. And the accident record of the Nat was not that great, in fact. And I think probably it's the accident rate, plus a lot of people thought it was pretty complex. It was complex. The control system was very complex. And that was one of the areas that would kill you. So I think, a decision was made fairly early on that they needed to move forward. And of course, then the Hawk came along, and the Hawk has done a fantastic job since. But those of us who were fortunate enough to fly the Nat absolutely loved it. Of course, in saying that, we never forget those that we knew who died in accidents. They would never be forgotten.
No, you're quite right there. Now, when the Nat was first envisaged by Folland, it was suggested it might be the answer to Europe's air defence problem, which was a pretty bold statement. Was it genuinely a practical solution?
No, not in my view. I mean, we did some interesting things with the Nat. It proved itself as a very effective fighter in the Indo-Pakistani wars, where the Indians loved it, and it was known as the Sabre Slayer. And that's where the fighter experience comes from. Plus Finland flew it as a fighter as well. But really, I mean, it's a very, you put the Nat on, it's a small aircraft, it's lightweight. It doesn't have the sort of capability to carry much weaponry. It doesn't have a radar, for example, where you're going to put a radar in it. So it's got a role in the fighter world. In the Air Force we used to use mixed fighter force operations. So tag a Nat onto a Phantom or a Tornado or something like that, and it can be used very effectively. But the answer to Europe's prayer, no.
The RAF's trainer version, the T1, I always found the integrated flight instrument system that it came with a delight to use. But its acceptance as a common system throughout the RAF kind of failed, really, since it only ever appeared in the Lightning and the Buccaneer. Now, why was that?
I really don't know, because all I can say is that I agree with you totally. The OR 946 instrument integrated system in the Nat was a beautiful system for instrument flying, quite frankly. And we had it in the Lightning, and as you said, and that's one of the reasons why I was such a good lead-in trainer to aircraft like the Lightning, because we used all these things. We got used to speed, we got used to the instrumentation. It wasn't just all that, but things like the instrument landing system as well, and doing auto ILSs, which the Nat you could do some very advanced things in. I really don't know why it wasn't used in more aircraft around the Air Force, because there's no doubt about it, in my view, it was in many ways ahead of its time at the time. It was a good system. It was
a delight to fly with. Now, when the Nat was accepted as the RAF's fast jet trainer, it had been in competition with the T7 Hunter, which most of us then flew prior to the attack weapons course. Now, the T7 was a side-by-side cockpit. The Nat, of course, was I don't know, like tandem, like a bicycle.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a factor in why it was chosen?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think it was the right choice. I found the tandem, I just found the Nat just an absolute delight to fly. And the tandem, personally as a student, the instructor and the student relationship was very good, and the instructor in the back, the view from the back wasn't that great, but you could certainly sort of, it was good for sort of instructing. And I found as a student, when I was a student there, it was nice being in my own cockpit. And when I was an instructor, I didn't find it was a hindrance not to have the student in the same part of the aircraft as me. I knew exactly what he was doing. I could monitor it. Whereas the Hunter, the T7, anybody you flew the Hunter, the T7 was the two-seater, and then you had the F6, which was a single-seater. And you know the difference between the two-seater and the single-seater. It didn't have the same power for a start, And not only that, but it was a lookout, side by side. It was a bit of a cumbersome thing. It was a nice thing to fly, but nothing like the Gnat.
No, you're quite right. An awful lot of ironwork around that cockpit. Absolutely. The Gnat was considered a very challenging aircraft for less able students to fly. Now, do you feel that was an advantage, considering the generation of fast jets that they were likely to move on to, despite the trainer's safety record?
What I will say is that anybody who got through the Gnat course had earned the right to go forward into the fast jet OCU world. It was demanding. I think for the lesser able students it was particularly demanding. Speed, as with the Lightning, in fact, it was one of those aircraft, you come from the Jet Provost onto the Gnat and it's a quantum leap forward. And you can read it in the book. The number of people, when they first flew the Gnat, they thought, wow, how am I ever going to fly this? But they do. They settle down and they love it. But there's always some who, the things that catch people out are mental capacity, ability to cope under pressure. And it does, flying the aircraft, the Gnat is the only aircraft that I've always said that I've had to fly it on the runway as well as in the air.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that statement.
Yeah, that really narrow undercarriage, wheelbase,
and the wings.
Yeah.
And on a wet runway, in a crosswind, it was not so bad on takeoff. Except you had to have the right amount of aileron into wind to keep the wings level. But on landing, it can be a real bugger, quite frankly, because it would rock and roll down the runway.
Absolutely. Yes, I remember doing that myself. I read with amusement Derek Bryant's story as the Central Flying School Gnat project officer, and one of the very first RAF Gnat pilots who, after 25 flights, mishandled the aircraft on takeoff and wrecked the undercarriage.
Yeah.
Now, yet this was an aircraft that students were supposed to be able to learn on. Do you think that was a lesson in itself?
It was a lesson, and they learned from it. And Derek Bryant sort of was very upfront about sort of what had happened. He had the job, rather like I did years later, to introduce the Tornado into service. He introduced the Gnat into service, and I think in many ways it's fortunate that happened because they learned from that. They introduced modifications as a result, which can only have helped in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, another marvellous bit in the book, I love Mike Shaw's poker player's description of the RAF Valley's hangars when he says, a full house, gnats on jacks. But it had the kind of ring of truth about it, didn't it? So why was the Gnat so often in the hangar instead of flying?
Well, it was a complex aircraft. I mean, the Jet Provost was a clockwork mouse, basically, compared with the Gnat. Mind you, the Gnat, compared with the Lightning hangars looked fairly interesting as well. But serviceability was a problem, particularly Mike Shaw was on, I think, he was on the very first course, in fact. So the aircraft engineers come in, and they did have big serviceability problems then. They overcame a lot of those. Certainly when I was flying the Gnat, some years later, we had loads of Gnats on the line, but not in Mike's day. So it was the complexity of the aircraft, and the fact that it was new, and to some extent the lack of spares at the time as well.
Discover the pioneers of speed and adventure at one of the UK's most iconic museums. Whether it's a tour of the legendary Concorde, a walk around the Brooklands aircraft factory, or maybe a behind-the-scenes look at the McLaren automotive cars, the Brooklands Museum has it all. Based at Weybridge in Surrey, it's the perfect day out for all the family. We can also host your private function or meeting in one of our amazing event suites. With so much to see and do, come and take a look at Great Britain's history of speed and flight. Find out more by going to www.brooklandsmuseum.com or give us a call on 01932 857 381. That's 01932 857 381.
Well, wasn't that marvellous? thanks very much indeed to Rick for agreeing to do the interview. I just love him and Nick chatting away as they do. And Nick knows how to get the best out of his interviewees, doesn't he? And that was no exception. We've got 2 more parts to play out, the following week and the week after that. And then we have the book, and Rick's very kindly signed it for us, and we'll be offering it as part of a quiz, which we'll do at the end of the 3rd part. And then the following week, we'll be announcing who the winner is. So stay tuned for that. But it's a great read, and there's plenty more to come from Rick over the next couple of weeks as well.
I can't wait. It's a really good series. We've been very lucky.
Where did you come from? You weren't there earlier.
I know. I've arrived in stealth mode. Did anybody notice?
He's morphed.
Morphed into what exactly? I'm just doing my Santa impressions.
Were you not happy with the production quality, so you decided to?
Yeah, I was watching in the town centre, and I couldn't bear it any longer. I had to come up, really. Never mind,
Yeah, we've on a note actually with what Nev was saying there. Obviously, with the book, we've got gonna give that away as a prize at the end of the series of interviews. As Nev said last week, and I think the week before that, Nev, we've got a whole host of really great aviation themed books, which we're going to be giving away right through into next year. Every month, we'll be giving away a book, won't we, Nev?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking at my collection now. I've got about another 8 or 9 to give away.
Well into next summer then.
So yeah, plenty. And Grub Street keeps sending them to us, so that'll be great.
Wonderful.
So they tend to send me one every couple of months. So,
mind you, we've had some great interviews off the back of that book series, isn't it? So I mean, we're very grateful for that, really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So it's time for the part of the show then, which normally Armando will introduce, but obviously he's not here. He's busy flying, isn't he? Doing what he does best. But he sent us in some really great videos this week to cover the military news. So if everyone's ready, Matt.
Oh yeah.
Hit the button.
Blast up buggies 135, 50, Angel 16, heading 340. Okay. 108 buggies.
This next military story. So by now, most everyone has probably seen the news about the collision between the B-17, the Texas Raiders, and the P-63 King Cobra down at the Wings Over Dallas Air Show. Now, over the last couple days, I've kind of thought about how to address this, and there's been some analysis done online on some of the aviation websites, and like anytime there's a mishap, there's just so many people that come out and try to think of reasons as to why this happened. Now, initially, I was a little bit upset about this because, I thought it was a scripted rejoin. So in the air shows, a lot of times when and I was talking to the guys on the show about the air shows in Duxford, where there's very complicated display sequences with lots of aircraft in the air at the same time. That's done pretty commonly with some of these World War I, World War II aircraft. All of this, as you guys can imagine, takes a lot of planning, a lot of briefing. For the pilots to be able to do this, they're very well qualified to do this, and all of it is almost always very well scripted. Now, initially, I thought this was supposed to be a rejoin between 2 aircraft, with the P-63 joining up on the B-17. Since then, I've discovered some more information as to that actually wasn't the case. Now, I will say the best analysis that I've seen so far actually came from AOPA's Aviation Safety Institute, and Mr. McSpadden. He was the former flight lead for the Thunderbirds, experienced air show pilot. He is the vice president of the Air Safety Foundation, and I'll point you guys over to his YouTube video, but he probably has the most credentialed, respectful, and thorough analysis of what actually happened here. I'll try to paraphrase what he said in that video, which to me makes the most sense out of all the analyses that has happened. Now, both aircraft, the B-17 and the P-63, were registered to the American Air Power Heritage Flying Museum. Both of them were flying on behalf of the Dallas-based Commemorative Air Force, which, as you guys know, is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to preserving and displaying historical aircraft. Now, most importantly, the CAF has released the names of the pilots and the crew killed in the incident aboard the B-17. It was Terry Barker, Don Reagan, Len Root, Kurt Rao, K5 Michaels, and aboard the P-63, the pilot was Craig Houtain. Now, this accident happened in full view of the spectators. Many caught the event on cameras. There was a lot of video that made its way through social media, as well as you can imagine this was a pretty big air show down there, and it was all captured on high-definition cameras. Now, during a press conference late Sunday, Mike Graham of the NTSB requested that if anybody actually has any photos or videos of the accident they'd like to ask, that you share them with the NTSB at witness@ntsb.gov. Now, as far as what happened in the crash, so there was a big air show at the Dallas Executive Airport. It was during what they're calling kind of an air parade of World War II aircraft. So according to multiple video sources and from what we saw, the P-63 was slightly higher altitude as it came from behind and to the left of the B-17 in a descending left turn. So the P-63 ended up striking the B-17 right behind the radio operator's compartment. It's pretty much halfway down the aircraft, but essentially carved the B-17 in half. And we were saying off air, it's kind of hard to imagine from some of the pictures that this was a modern day capture of something like that. It looks straight out of something that would a picture that you would see from World War II. It was very emotional, very sort of raw watching the videos. Of course, both aircraft ended up, hitting the ground after this. Neither one of the aircraft was survivable. So the investigation is happening, right? The debris field was pretty much on the airfield. A little bit ended up on the highway right there next to that airport. NTSB was there. The FAA was there, obviously reviewing a lot of the video footage. The B-17 had been in the air for about 11 minutes. The P-63 for about 6 minutes when the collision happened. Obviously, some people thought this was actually part of the show, but most aviators and spectators that have seen this kind of show knew that something was wrong pretty quickly. In this kind of air show, in this kind of scripted thing, separation of the aircraft is imperative, and it's briefed, it's rehearsed, it's sacrosanct to maintain the separation. And one of the things that Mr. McSpadden from the Aviation Safety Institute brought up was actually the crowd line. Now, on air shows, almost at any air show, well, really at any air show, there are very defined crowd lines that are established. So that may be 500 feet from the crowd, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet from the crowd, depending on the aircraft, its capacity, its speeds. In this case, some of the initial analysis shows that, and this was all pre-briefed, and these were very experienced pilots, all from the Commemorative Air Force. The B-17 was on its established crowd line, which was the closest to the crowd. So essentially right over the runway, and the runway ran sort of northwest bound. Crowd lines are usually very visible from the aircraft. So it could be a runway, a taxiway. Sometimes they put out some panels. So the B-17, based on its previous tracks from different parts of the air show, was pretty much right on its intended path, just west of the crowd line, where it was supposed to be away from the crowd, essentially right over the runway. And the B-17 is not the most maneuverable aircraft, so they had a pretty big wide pattern as they came around. The fighter crowd line was a little bit further than that, so probably about 500 feet further west or away from the crowd. And from some of the videos that you see from the air show, there's two P-51s that are part of the formation of the fighters, of the three fighters, so there's two P-51s and then the P-63. The two P-51s seem to be where they're supposed to be on the west side of their crowd line, which is 500 feet away from the B-17 and its crowd line over the runway. So more over to the west side of the field, over the woods. Now, the initial analysis from the Aviation Safety Institute, and it makes sense from the FAA and the NTSB, everybody's talked about the visibility from the P-63. Really, any of those fighters, the P-51, P-63, really, most of those World War II fighters had terrible visibility out the front, and especially to the bottom. So you never go belly up. Same thing as Reno. And from initial analysis, it seemed like the P-63 was actually coming around and missed its show line, missed its crowd line, and had converged over to the B-17's crowd line. From the direction that the P-63 was coming, it's highly likely that he never saw, the pilot never saw either the B-17 or the fact that he was outside the crowd line until he was already well into the turn, almost over the airport property. And right in some of the videos, you can see where there is an increased bank and a bit of a pool. That's probably right when he realized that he was not entirely in trail behind the P-51s and also past his crowd line. Now, the chances of those two aircraft being at the exact same moment at the exact same time is incredibly unfortunate, pretty rare. Even busting a crowd line is taken very seriously, both by the pilots, by the airshow organizers, and by the regulatory authorities. This pilot had flown air shows in this airplane plenty of times before, but it was one of these situations where now you've lost that separation between the fighter crowd line and the B-17's crowd line. So it's highly likely that the P-63 pilot never actually saw the B-17, and of course, the B-17 never saw the P-63, as there's very little rearward visibility from the cockpit unless they had somebody up in the tail, which is unlikely based on the crew composition of the aircraft at the time. It's a very unfortunate incident. It's just one of these things that, there are mistakes that happen in aviation. These, much like Reno, much like some of the air shows that you see out there, all of this is very well planned out. Initially, I had a little bit of anger towards the whole situation, thinking, man, it is unnecessary for a high-speed rejoin like that over a crowd. That turned out not to be the case, and that was just a gut reaction on my part. But to be honest, the likelihood of this kind of incident happening is pretty rare, and it's incredibly unfortunate this particular time that two beautiful aircraft were lost, that the 6 individuals that lost their lives, very experienced crew members, dedicated to showing off these aircraft and taking them to air shows and keeping the memory of these World War II aircraft alive. But I think most importantly, it was very important. It was very fortunate that nobody in the crowd was hurt. This was, I don't know why, but this kind of incident really hit everyone in the aviation community hard. If you guys know, a couple years ago now, we did an interview with Larry Combs. Larry Combs is a crew chief for the Confederate Air Force P-51 Red Nose down in Atlanta at the Dixie Wing. He had actually flown quite a bit with Craig, who was the pilot of the P-63. He made a social media post that Craig was one of the best pilots he knew, and really all-around fun guy, very experienced pilot at the commemorative Air Force. So even a big event like this sometimes actually hits close to home. One of my best friends, Shelby here, who flies for a regional airline here in Charlotte, she is part of the commemorative Air Force wing out there in Arizona. and they knew some of the pilots out there from this B-17. So even a big national event like this, actually, the aviation community, as we always say, is so small that it actually hits pretty close to home. So we'll see what happens with the NTSB investigation. I'm sure we'll hear something fairly quickly. The aircraft were mechanically sound. The pilots were all trained. All safety considerations leading up to the mishap were followed, as far as we know. But we'll see, I'm sure, in a couple weeks what ultimately the cause of this mishap was. And then, like I said, most importantly, nobody in the crowd was lost. But very unfortunate incident. And yeah, we'll keep an eye out. And of course, the families of these pilots and everybody that saw this incident happen firsthand, there's a high potential for a traumatic experience here. So our hearts go out to everyone involved in the mishap, and that was part of that air show.
I mean, it's just such an awful incident, isn't it, really? And as you say, it's something that the people who were at that air show are going to remember forever and ever, isn't it? It's, I suppose if there's if you have something like this, I suppose there's plenty of video footage for,
there was a number of videos. Yeah, there was I think well over 100 videos on YouTube of various camera angles that people had taken from various points in and around the area. A lot of which were used on the news platforms in the US and here in the UK. But it was awful to see, really awful to see. I'd just got home from a gig actually late at night when I checked my news feeds and found that on there, early hours of the Sunday morning. Yeah. But obviously there's investigation to be done. The NTSB are doing their investigation, I know. And you can actually, if you go on the NTSB's YouTube page, they've got quite a good video there where they actually chat about what the process of what they're doing. Yeah, just the preliminary part of the investigation on there.
I mean, is that normal, or is it just because of the sort of high profile of the incident? Because obviously a lot of people were there, I suppose. So
they tend to do that quite a bit, actually. That it's quite an interesting thing to listen to, because these guys are actually going to be talking, sense.
Yeah, true.
As opposed to some videos that you can see. But it'd be interesting to see as well going forward how this affects future shows in the US as well, air shows.
Any thoughts, Matt?
Well, just echoing, everyone else's thoughts, really, how tragic it is. No one gets up in the morning and sets out to go and cause a massive accident, do they? So,
indeed,
whatever the results are, it's terrible, isn't it? And I always find these things, it's sad when you see the footage or you see something about it, but then when you see the pictures that they put out of all the crew, it's really sad, isn't it, knowing that all those people were involved.
I mean, Nev, genuinely, do you think this will change? It's not just going to affect the UK, this, is it? I mean, obviously what happened here is going to echo across the world in terms of all air shows, I think.
Lessons are always learned, aren't they? Even in the most tragic circumstances, and this is no exception. And it was just nice for Armando to give his thoughts on various things there. He's the right person to have reported on it for us.
I agree. Definitely. Wholeheartedly. Yeah.
So, next video coming up from the military segment by Armando, and this video is all about the US Air Force's virtual training.
This next military story is from AirForceTimes.com, and recently we've been talking about some revolutionary changes in Air Force training, but Air Force airmen are actually gearing up to what could be the most consequential move in military pilot training since the Air Force was actually created in 1947, which is teaching students how to fly an airplane without actually stepping foot in a real airplane. So this new program is called the Air Mobility Fundamentals Simulator. It's the Air Force's next step in a years-long project to modernize pilot training without sacrificing quality. So it's also an opportunity for the service to embrace some more cost-effective technology and retire its 30-year-old fleet of T-1 Jayhawk trainer jets, which we've talked about on the show is essentially a Hawker Raytheon beach jet. Now, some experts are warning that turning out experienced pilots is actually more complicated than just trading an airworthy cockpit for some kind of replica, as these simulators are. Now, Heather Penny, a retired Air National Guard fighter pilot who now researches defense policy, says that there's a lot of value to a simulator, but there's something fundamentally different when you're up in the air. In the air, that risk management sets in, is really ingrained in somebody when there's no do-overs and no resets. So the new path, here's how it works. The first military aircraft that a student touches is the T-6 Texan II. We've talked about that airplane on the show also. That's part of the undergraduate pilot training program curriculum. Pilots earn their wings in the T-6, which takes about 7 months, at which point a trainee is selected to continue either on the fighter bomber track or the mobility track. About 900 students are picked for the mobility track each year. And those airmen who are training to fly cargo, tanker aircraft, as well as some special operations, some intelligence gathering airplanes, typically spend about 5 months in the T1, which is an intermediate step towards their operational unit. Now, those who pass the T1 course then move on to learn about their actual assigned aircraft. Now, starting in January of next year, this interim step, known as the Specialized Undergraduate Pilot Training, will only use simulators to teach more advanced flight skills in about 75 days. Now, this includes the current T1 simulator and a newly designed, more generic virtual reality cockpit from well-known simulator producer Redbird Flight Simulations. Each undergraduate pilot training base is going to host 8 Redbird systems and 4 legacy T1 simulators, according to the Air Force. Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma got its first Redbird simulators in September. Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi is slated to receive its simulators by March 2023, and Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas is getting its simulators by July of 2023. Now, teaching would begin 4 to 6 months after the systems are delivered. That means that the redesigned course may not actually go into full effect or fully implemented until early 2024. Now, Redbird's custom-built T1 cockpit uses a software designed by longtime defense contractor SAIC and Lockheed Martin to closely, but not exactly, replicate the experience of flying the T1. The view outside the airplane is virtual. Cameras on a headset let students see their own hands as they manipulate the controls and the knobs, which makes the experience a little bit more realistic and useful than trying to move, fake hands around a screen like some of the simulators that you might find at home. Now, the simulators can be very effective tools for teaching emergency procedures and scenarios that aren't possible in a local area, flight. That's according to 2 military experts who spoke to the Air Force Times. It does, and I've experienced this firsthand, let students safely explore what the airplane software can do, especially potentially sensitive maneuvers out of the public view, and of course, with a much, much lower risk. And in systems that track where a pilot is looking, or the order in which they hit certain buttons, the sim technology can actually help grade their performance based on established flows and checklist items. So new curriculum has been in the works for about a year, and I think we mentioned it about 3 weeks ago on the show. In particular, this new course emphasizes how to use an FMS, how to properly manage resources without all your engines, so in this case, 1 engine instead of 2 engines, how to run autopilot, read takeoff and landing data, all the things that you would expect out of a simulator training session. Now, the Air Force vetted its plan in 3 small group trials at Joint Base San Antonio in Texas. Now, judging by their performance later on in training, some Air Force spokespersons said that there was no discernible difference between the students who went through the traditional course and the students who went through this virtual reality course as compared to past students. Basically, they're thinking that they're on the right track. Now, the airmen themselves offered plenty of feedback so that the companies could make new simulators realistic enough to teach the skills that they needed. Whether a simulator effectively stands in for live flight depends on its level of fidelity. That is based on physical attributes, visual or mental attributes, and how close that comes to the real thing actually depends on what it is that the course is trying to impart and what they're trying to teach. So for instance, a full motion simulator can demonstrate what it feels like to land a helicopter on an uneven surface. But the virtual reality goggles can't fully replicate those kind of physical sensations that you feel in the airplane. They're pretty good, but it's just not quite there. Of course, there are cost considerations to this. If the objective is to teach decision making under stress without feeling physical impact, VR headsets could be a good fit compared to a costly full motion simulator. Efficiency also matters. The Air Force has ordered 20 Redbirds so far. The company's unique cockpits that they're producing for the military cost somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000, including the flight software. That's a fraction of the price of a more advanced simulator with the technology to replicate G-forces, for instance. They can run tens of millions of dollars, those full motion simulators. And just like we've done on the commercial side, when I was down at Delta Airlines for the ATP CTP, that A320 simulator is tens of millions of dollars. When I did my Hawker training, when I did my Pilatus training, all at Flight Safety International, those simulators are in the tens of millions of dollars. So this is a pretty significant cost savings there. Now, once these simulators are up and running, this new approach doesn't drastically change the instructors' roles from the traditional simulators, because they're still kind of doing using the same skill set to teach these students. And then, of course, with the virtual reality being so immersive, the instructor pilots are essentially doing the same job as they would both in the simulator and in the airplane. And we did talk a couple weeks ago about there is actually a simulator instructor shortage because the Air Force needs those pilots to be out on the line flying. So this is essentially the way of the future. These virtual reality simulators, these full motion simulators, it's pretty common in the commercial world. If you are interested in flying for an airline, a lot of times you're going to go through training, whether it's a couple weeks or a couple months, you're going to go fully into the simulator. And the first time that you touch the airplane for real is actually on the line in a real airplane with live passengers in the back. Can be a little bit scary. A lot less risk in the Air Force with not having to carry passengers in the back. But either way, this is a pretty revolutionary move in Air Force training. And to the U.S. Air Force, if you're looking for somebody that is on a world-renowned aviation podcast that you would like to try out your new virtual reality and full motion simulators, I'm sure that all four of us would like to take a go at it. So we'll keep an eye out on this.
I see what he did there. I see what he did there. I don't know how I mean, it sounds like an absolutely brilliant idea. It seems like a logical thing, but as Armando alluded to there, I mean, I suppose this. I mean, we're looking at this as a military application, but presumably this can be extended to commercial as well, as he was saying there. But like, I don't know how comfortable I would be if the first time that you actually sort of like flew an aeroplane with actual people on board, was like the first time you actually did it, rather than like using the VR all the way up to it. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about this, Matt?
Mixed, really. I mean, I think there's definitely space for it to be used as a tool. Depends how much of it you use, really. I mean, of course, we use simulation a lot in our training anyway, and upgrading that simulation to including VR could be good. I think there's ways to go. A lot of people feel sick when they're using these VR things. I was at an airline training event in Berlin last week, as I was saying earlier, and the Airbus actually had a VR stand there, as did a couple of other companies, and they're looking at using this VR for training. But they were saying themselves the biggest trouble they've got at the moment is that a lot of people are feeling sick when they're using them. So they're looking at putting the VR rig on a moving platform like a traditional training simulator, well, if you're doing that, you're losing a lot of the cost benefit of going VR. So I think the technology's still got a little way to go. But I think it's certainly a useful tool. Yeah.
The whole VR thing for training, I think it's a good idea. But like Tony S is saying in the chat room, how can you simulate G-forces and stuff and stressful environments when you're wearing a headset in a room?
You can't do that in our current simulators either, so it's not necessarily worse than we've got now, but it sometimes can be more immersive, I guess.
True.
I still would love to have a go on a full motion sim.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to go to the fixed base one, didn't we, at Putney in London.
That
for
was
the 200th. But I would love to have a go on one of those full motion ones.
I'll take you in a full motion sim if you like.
All right, you're now my best friend.
Good lord. Right, okay.
No worries.
Let me know when. I don't care when it is.
Yeah. He'll literally
wedding
cancel work
anniversary,
for it,
the wife's birthday. I don't. It's not an issue there. Let me know when you want me to come and see.
Lovely. Okay, so before Carlos gets divorced, shall we move on to the next part of the show?
Yes, we better, I suppose.
Yes.
I'll get it for both of you as a joint present, then you can use it.
No, you and Nev go, because it'd be wasted on me. It really would.
So, Nev, we've got a very special part of the show, haven't we, coming up next?
Yes, very much so. Well, you'll remember that Carlton and I went to the Jersey International Air Display a couple of months ago, and whilst on the plane, we met up with a nice gentleman called John Falk. We got chatting to him on the plane, and we exchanged business cards and the usual sort of stuff. And we received an email from John this week, and we thought we would read that out with his permission as well. He says, "Dear Nev, we met briefly whilst we were flying over to Jersey on BA for the air show this year in September. My father is Rowley Falk, who test flew the Avro Vulcan in 1952. He's got a brief Wikipedia entry and flew over 300 different types of aircraft. Though not well known, his father, my grandfather, Oswald Falk, founded and headed a merchant bank, which is O.T. Falk and Partners, which funded Frank Whittle in the development of the jet engine.
Oh, wow.
My other grandfather was also an Avro test pilot, Bill Thorne, who was tragically killed in the Tudor 2 crash with Roy Chadwick. He was involved with Sam Brown, who's another great Avro test pilot, in the development of the Lancaster. Now, he said, just before I met with you, with a group of volunteers keeping the Avro Vulcan XL426 alive and kicking, we recreated a photo of my father climbing into a Vulcan on the 70-year anniversary of its first flight. Wow. And he's very kindly sent me a copy of the video of the event, which also includes a high-speed taxi run. So if you'd like to play this one, Matt, let's have a look.
Well, I had a high expectation, and it met all my expectations, and I still don't understand quite how I managed to win the raffle that the VRT organised, and I know that was all done in a fair way, but the stars were obviously aligned, and it was a pleasure here to take part in it. I mean, it was a very, very special experience. I was born at the same year that he did the first flight, so and he retired from flying from test flying in about 1958-59. So I didn't really have much knowledge of his flying. But the special piece is to actually recreate that photo and think that here 70 years ago that he was standing there, a lot younger than me in that photo. But to actually be able to do that thanks to the VRT is really something very special. I mean, it's something to be recreated by the ladder is really, yeah. story about the fact that he decided to put a fighter-style control stick on the Vulcan. That was his request, because the initial flights, I believe, were done with a spectacled-style control stick, and his argument was he didn't want to leave his knees behind if he had to eject out, which I think is the reason. If there was any problem during the ejection, then he wanted to make sure that everything came with him. And then obviously he has a lot of fame for rolling the Vulcan at the 55 show at Farnborough, and most people want to talk about that, and I think the thing to understand about that is he always said it was a constant 1G while doing the roll, a Dutch roll I think it was called. And there was his favourite engineer, who was in the back. He told me later on, many years later, that he balanced a pencil while the roll was being done. Now, also, I'm not sure if that's he said yes, it was real, John. So I believe him. He did it.
I mean, just wow. I'll tell you what, that grin on his face as he was taxiing there,
we all had a grin.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you know what I mean? It was the face of a man who was taking a trip down memory lane. Do you know what I mean? It was a real... I'm so glad they recorded it, because that was such a special moment, Nev. I don't know what you think.
Unbelievable, and it was so nice to talk to John about it very briefly on the aircraft. John's actually sent us some other information connected with the Jersey Airways historic de Havilland Heron. It's an aircraft which they that was in the local newspaper, actually, and we're going to discuss that on next week's show, actually, because we've got quite a lot of cram in this week. So I thought we'd cut up into two parts, and we'll talk about the Jersey Airways de Havilland Heron on next week's show.
Love it, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that as well. It was a good bit of video, that, I think.
Thanks so much, John, for that.
Yeah, brought back some nice memories of the 100th show
episode.
that we done live on the Vulcan. Back in, that's a few years ago now.
I know.
So next one, we've got a bit of listener feedback, haven't we, Nev, from of a MiG-15?
Yes, well... normally when somebody says, "Oh, would you like to see a picture of my girlfriend in an aircraft?"
Right.
I thought Dirk, our listener, was going to say, "Oh, it's in a 172 or a PA-28."
Something small and normal.
No, he's gone completely to the other end of the scale, and he very kindly sent me some video of this. I edited it together for him, but he sent me all the raw footage. So I've put together a little compilation of the time that Sylvia, Dirk's girlfriend, was in the MiG-15.
Hello, PT UK family. Greetings from the beautiful town of Hradec Králové in the Czech Republic, about 100 kilometers east of Prague. I am Dirk S, and you might know me from the YouTube chat room on a Friday evening. We are here, and that's me and my beautiful girlfriend Sylvia. We are here for a reason, and as you might guess, it is an aviation-related reason, because my girlfriend will have a very special aviation event later today. So stay tuned for more. Hello, welcome back. We are now at the Hradec Králové airport, which you can see in the background. So there's one of the back gates. We are way ahead of time, so I thought it might be time for a quick interview, because what's happening now in about an hour is that she is going to have a ride in a MiG-15 fighter jet from the 1950s. And it was her present to her 40th birthday, which I hope I can say. And so I'm now going to ask her a few questions. So, are you looking forward to it?
Yes, but I'm also a little nervous.
You're nervous? Okay. Why is that so?
I'm keen to know how it will feel like, It's all about that, and I think it will be quite intense.
Yes, I believe it'll feel intense too. What do you think will be the most intense part?
I guess the takeoff and when the aircraft pulls up after a dive.
Yeah, you're definitely going to feel the acceleration and the G-forces.
Yes.
Are you afraid of something in particular, or do you have any concerns?
I'm a little afraid to become sick in the air.
Could that happen?
I've not been on a roller coaster for a long time now, I don't know, but I'm actually not really afraid.
What were your thoughts when you realized what your birthday present was?
I actually realized it quite late what is going to happen, especially when we switch to the MiG-15, which is something really special. Even when you tell friends and colleagues what you are going to do, the reaction was either wow or what is that?
I also don't know anyone who has flown in a MiG-15 yet.
And that's why I think it's a very special and wonderful present, and I'm looking forward to it.
Der bisher in der MiG-15 geflogen ist.
Deswegen finde ich das sehr besonders und schön und da freue ich mich.
Ja, das freut mich auch. So, we're gonna translate it afterwards and let's see. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna have some footage ready for you guys. So see you then. So as you can see, we just pushed it out of the hangar by hand, and oh my god, look at this beauty. Isn't she amazing? I can't stop smiling, although I won't be flying on it. I wouldn't survive it. Like, I'll get sick in about 10 seconds. Wow.
Oh god. To the back.
The front seat is for the pilot, you know?
Yes. Okay. Then sit down. And this is a parachute. Another set of belts. They hold you in the seat. I will show you.
Here we go. pass, folks. Not quite the same, but still beautiful. She's smiling. Looks like everything's fine. Let's see.
Aerobatics maneuver.
5G.
5G. And speed was about 750 maybe. I don't know, and this in low pass.
So you tell me she can take 5G without problem?
5G, no problem. No problem. Because it's here, it's ready. No
Yeah, she's fine. She's smiling, she's laughing.
Ich habe gesagt, ich bin ready.
Stop sitzen. Už stejně. Tak já to, když to bude jinak, tak to budu hlásit jinak, tak ještě.
So we're back in the car. How did
Burger.
Wie war's?
Aufregend. Krass.
Schön.
Schön. Alles. Alles.
You see?
Irre.
No words for that.
I mean, wow.
I mean, Sylvia looks so relaxed about the whole thing, doesn't she, really? Dirk has very kindly also given us some stills that he took of the day as well, which shows you some different angles of the aircraft whilst it's being prepared.
We were saying when we were doing that, when it was coming down the runway, weren't we, that it looks like it's got its prop missing, at the front there. Like, it's just like, I mean, what an experience that is. I mean, she seemed quite sort of almost emotional in the car, didn't she, off the back of that? I mean,
Jonathan Warner is very impressed.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
in the chat room.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
would be. Yeah.
Matt, you were saying that you wanted to be in the front.
Yeah, you get a better view, wouldn't you?
Right. Okay, yeah. I mean, there is that small issue of flying it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, wow, what an experience. I mean, you're never going to forget something like that, are you? That is just, like, mind-blowing. What a great thing. What a great thing.
Normally I say things that money can't buy are really good, but I think money has changed hands here.
Oh, I see. He got to sit in the front.
There
I
he
see,
is.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. He sat in the front briefly. Yeah. Oh, I couldn't do. I'd be so jealous not being able to go with him.
Yeah.
That'd just be so brutal, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks for sending that in, Dirk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really
Yeah,
good. Really
very
good.
good.
What an experience. What an experience.
What a selfless gift as well.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, that wouldn't be me, I can assure you.
I'll get one for Gemma.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yes, pigs may also fly.
that would go down extremely well.
Yeah. Divorce, I think, will
So
closely
a
follow.
substantial amount of money has
Yeah.
been
Yeah, blimey.
Yeah.
If it came with a Gucci handbag, she'd probably be fine.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah. Or a divorce. Yeah.
Right, so swiftly on before we're running out of time quickly here. We're going to quickly do the caption this for this week.
Okay.
We did do a caption this on our Facebook page. For those of those of you who don't know, every week we try and put a picture up on a Wednesday for you to leave your witty comments on. This week, Matt will pop the picture up on the screen for those of you who haven't seen it yet. This was the picture in question. It's a military special one this week, especially means Armando is not here with us. And
That's ridiculous.
For those of you listening in the world of audio land, this is it's a C-130 Hercules doing air-to-air refueling with a microlight.
Yes, that's not really something I expected. Yeah, for starters, the fuel intake's around the back. But anyway, yeah.
I was just thinking about the prop wash from the Hercules. Might be an issue with this particular aircraft. But we had some great comments on the picture this week. First one I'm going to kick off. This one's from John. And he says, in this week's military section, retired C-130 and Osprey pilot Armando talks to us talks US Air Force student pilots about the benefits of cost saving of Air Force pilot training and how pilots are learning to look about low radar reflection patterns in their early training.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Right. What's Bill got, Nev?
Bill says, Tanker 434, this might be too much information for you, but there's no human way my probe will reach and fill that receptacle.
Matt, go on, Matt. Matt Smith for this one. Oh, you've got the thing. Sorry, Matt. A320, Matt. Go on.
We've got Bernard that says, is that the unleaded pump?
Steve is saying Captain Nick attempts to relive his Hornet days from episode 414.
Right. Okay. Very good.
Nev?
Gary says, thank God my Red Bull's arriving.
Gives you wings, I suppose. Yeah. Matt?
Bill says David Attenborough voiceover. Female Hercules photographed just after spawning a new baby.
Very good, Matt.
Very good.
That's very good.
Bravo. Yeah, very good.
More like Alan Wicker, actually.
Okay, right.
And
that'll do. Yeah.
Norman says, it's okay, Bill. I'll get your hearing aid for you.
Right.
Yeah, I suppose it would be a bit breezy.
Yeah,
behind
tad.
there.
Just a
tad
tad.
behind
Yeah.
there. Richard Adams in the chat room saying 2 litres of unleaded, please.
A Mark on WhatsApp is saying, gyrocopter to Herc, can you speed up a bit, please?
So don't forget, if you want to comment on the witty pictures that we post on our Facebook page, don't forget to check us out on Facebook when I post these on a Wednesday, normally on a Wednesday, for you to leave your comments on, and we'll read the best ones out on the show, live on the show. So it's time to start to wrap up the show then. Social media links. Nev, where can everyone across the globe find us on the social medias?
Yes, you can go to Facebook, Twitter or Instagram and just search for Plain Talking UK. You can send us your pictures or comments to our WhatsApp number, +44 757 2249 That's +44 757 2249 Email the show, podcast@plaintalkinguk.com, and the website is all the W's, plaintalkinguk.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get notifications when we go live, and you can help to shape the conversation of the show by joining us in the chat room, as so many people have done so. On that, you can also go to our website and use the Amazon link. So if you do your shopping through Amazon, you can do it through the website, and we get paid a small referral fee also. You can also become a Patreon, and you can donate whatever money you would like to do so, and that's not a prerequisite. You can do so if you wish, and that helps us keep the show on the road. Have a look at the website for that. That's www.plaintalkinguk.com.
So before we go, Matt, obviously have you been doing much flying and stuff lately?
Yes, a fair bit. I've been, as I said earlier, been down to the Canaries in what I would call long haul. I've been doing a fair bit of long haul lately, which for us is between 4 and 5 hours.
Oh, blimey, Friday.
So, yeah, I know.
That's
not
not
proper long haul. Exactly.
Yeah, because even I wouldn't call that long haul, and I don't like it.
That's my long haul.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And
very busy. Busy off on the ground as well, with a lot of training stuff I've been doing. So yeah.
Sounds amazing. Have you got any sort of projects on the go at the moment?
Well, I've been concentrating a lot on doing these command upgrade courses. So a lot of pilots that have got their commands coming up, I coach them and get them ready for their upgrade course. So being quite busy with doing that at the moment. A lot of airlines around the world are recruiting at the moment and having to promote first officers to captains. So yeah, been pretty busy doing
Very
that.
busy. Yeah, sounds amazing. Cool. Nev, what are you up to this week? Anything exciting?
No, I'm pleased to say. A little bit of driving, but no flying this week. So I'm actually quite grateful for that because it was a bit tiring this week.
Yeah, I bet.
Just some local bits and pieces this week.
Oh, dear, how would you cope? Yeah, absolutely. Carlos, what about you?
Off down to Kent on Monday. This Monday coming.
Wow, okay.
In the truck with a full load of stuff to go into a big shop, which will be a nice drive, hopefully, as long as it's not raining, of course.
Well, yes, that's true. That's true.
And a 50th birthday tomorrow.
Oh,
disco,
wow,
just
lovely.
for a change.
Okay. Well, next week I will be mostly lying in because I can for the first time in 2 weeks, so that's going to be quite nice. The lovely Jono's back on the radio, so I get to have a bit of a lie-in. But I'm on the radio 7 till 10 tomorrow. You're on 10 till 1, aren't you?
Yes,
there you
after
go.
you.
Right.
So that is where we're going to bring episode 434 of the show to a close. Big thanks to everyone who's tuned in tonight through YouTube. Some new viewers in there. Welcome to you, to the podcast family. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday on the show at 7 o'clock, so don't forget to tune in next week on the show. So from me and Matt, I can't believe I'm saying this, from me and Matt here in the PTUK Master Studios, from Nev across in his studio, and from Matt in his home studio as well. Have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.